and talking about the future of the church and all these things. And he went into the hospital, and then just a day or so later, he was with the Lord. And of course, we're thinking that the church was struggling with about 12 members, and with his health issues, it was really a very difficult time. And he had been praying for some time for someone to come and help and work with him. And the story of Marcelo Brondo is really how God brought someone to work with Jorge, and how those last months before his death, Marcelo Brondo and Jorge Molina bonded. Marcelo would have to go into Cordova, about 45 minutes away from Carlos Paz, and he would go into the city, and there, after his doctor's appointment, he would meet with Marcelo, and the two of them would pray together about the work there in Carlos Paz, and what can they do, and how can they work together in the future. And the Lord took Jorge at just the right time. And a very emotional time, really, for us and for his family, his wife and daughters, Vilma, who is, again, with breast cancer right now, and a very difficult time for them as family. And the church was down to about a dozen people, and you'll see something of what God has done since. Maybe just to see if we could, you can read things faster than I can, and I'm sure much better than I can, but the history of Marcelo Brondo is one of starting a work way up in the high mountains of Argentina, up about, I believe, something like about 11,000 feet or so of Cache, and way up in the north of Argentina. And as a church from Cordova, where Sam Masters is and has the William Carey Seminary, they sent Marcelo and his wife and daughter there, Nancy and Priscilla, with him. And they went up to that area, and let's see what we've got here. There we go. The inhabitants of Cachi are really from the, let's see, here we go. Part of that whole empire, the Incas. And in a sense, when we think of the Inca Empire, we kind of think of something long, long ago, but there's still, for instance, about 11 to 15 million people that speak Quechua. And so this whole influence all the way down in that area. And so when you go to Cachi, if you're a tourist, they love you. You have money. If you come there with the gospel, of course, you're an enemy. But just being from the outside, that is an Argentine going to this city, you're rejected. You're an outsider. And it's a very indigenous kind of thing. Hundreds of years, their religion has been a mix of nature worship and Catholicism. And so you have that element there of what's called the Pachamama, their earth worship ritual. And it really is very much a part of that whole culture that's there. And when we went there, Sam Masters and Nancy, my wife, and Carita with Sam, the four of us went there on a trip, and you start to feel all these roads and all that you're going through and everything. You feel like real missionaries, suddenly. I mean, this is quite an experience getting there. And there, on the way there was just thousands and thousands of people going for this festival that was this huge thing. I mean, it goes on for a whole week. People coming from all over. And anyway, just an amazing story there of these mixture of strange religion with Catholicism. And they began to work there after years of working in that area. The church people going up there and working and establishing this work. They then had this real amazing breakthrough with people. He had started a radio program there in Cachi, and with this, their outreach to children, the radio program to the work that was there, and then they really did build quite a home that's pictured right here. And then here he is really, Marcelo Brondo is very good constructor, builder. And they, as it says there, they have a handwritten copy of the Great Commission buried there as part of the background there. And the baptisms, really, one of the nights that we were there, we thought we'd be preaching, but we decided, as about 45 of them gathered on a Wednesday night for a prayer meeting, we decided instead of preaching, we thought we'd just start around the room and find out how they've all come to Christ in different ways. And all those people, it was just a room full of tears. It seemed like Ephesians chapter 2 was the chapter for everybody, you know, how they were dead in sins and how the grace of God came to them. And so it really was an amazing night of hearing of God's grace and how these people really from a whole nother culture and world have come to know the Lord. And so this was a really an amazing night. I still remember, of course, if you're in Argentina, which you have those wonderful asados, barbecues. They bring all these different cuts of meat. What I still remember earlier in that day, he had done an asado, and he had these big, huge bones, and he had this huge dog, and he'd throw these things out there, and this dog would just go crunch, 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 grind them down. It was almost like, I don't think I want to come in here in the night. You know, it just would not be wise. But it was kind of part of what was necessary. And so I mentioned how this conflict of these cultures are so real, in that their daughter, Priscilla, when she was 4, she arrived there with them and went into the local school. And right from the beginning, there was this real persecution. She excelled every year. She would be the top student all the way through high school. And in that last year of high school, there really was what we have to call attacks, not just threats, but real attacks physically. And she went through a really difficult time, and that was really the reason they had to leave Kachi. It came to the place where they were going to protect their daughter and care for her, not only physically, but psychologically, just to care for her. They had to move from the work that was there, even though they had all this work with children and outreach in different ways that they had there of trying to reach out to the community. This is the church building that they built, and really just an amazing story of their working together with these young couples and all that was part. There's Sam Masters preaching up there. Part of their extension of their church has been that work. And so the Lord also allowed Marcelo to begin a local radio program to teach about the scriptures. The gospel message continues airing to this day. And the good thing is, though they left, the William Carey Seminary had been training, and one of the young men that had lived with Sam and Carita there in Cordoba got married, and they were then those sent to take their place, a young couple up there in Kachi. And so with this, they then returned, that is Marcelo Brondo, and that was when this bond was formed with Jorge Molina. And so a very important element there. Then just in this time during the pandemic, his being back down into the Cordoba area, there's about 15 congregations in the Cordoba area that are, maybe when we say congregations, they may not have a membership. Some do have membership, some do have elders. They're at different in the process. And what Marcelo did was to go around to all these works and work with them, forming an association of churches together. And so this let's see, when was it? Was it last March or last year? Anyway, a lot of these trips get confused for me. But in a beautiful way, we had 56 pastors that came together, and that was when they kind of finalized forming this group of pastors together. And Marcelo has been the one organizing and working with these churches and seeing this work together. And here's Sam, and they have a small magazine that they sent out among the churches and publish different articles in Spanish, and are working with that. And then this was the conference with there that really was organized by Marcelo Brondo. And there's the beautiful grounds that we were able to meet on, and all the guys. It was just a joy. The background of this work, there might be a few of you remember that in 9/11, 2001, we, as a group of churches, had sent a missionary there. Bob Self, myself, and Don Donnell had gone there in 1999 to see how we could see a missionary sent to Argentina. And answering that call that was given, we spent about 3 weeks there trying to see how that could happen. And there was training and language school. And when Don Donnell went there in 2001, he landed on 9/11. And of course, everything changed while he was in flight. And he's weeks there just waiting, what's next? And so he was the one who started the work there in Carlos Paz. And so during that time, there was not another like church that would have been Reformed Baptist kind of church in any of the areas that they knew of. And through the conferences we had the contact then with Sam Masters, and that began this working together as churches. And it's so important that it's doing this, or a group, small group, all these men encouraging and working together with one another. And here was this conference. They had, I think, 6 times. We spent about 30 minutes to 45 minutes in prayer. We divided up into 6 groups of 9, if I remember my math right. And we had these times of prayer, just everybody just giving themselves to pray for how the churches would be built up. And so questions with some answers that I think are good also. And we worked at that. And so here again, that explanation, due to the death of a pastor in a nearby congregation, which is Jorge Molina, Marcelo became pastor of the Monte de Luz Church of Grace in the city of Carlos Paz, also in Córdoba province. And let me just say a word here. Since Marcelo has gone there, he has gotten young people to come in from other churches and distribute on 3 occasions like 2,000 invitations through that whole area. And from that, he's gotten some people who have come to the church. And then besides that, he's visited all the people who over the years have either come and left or whatever, and has gone and visited all those people. And some of those have come back. And so with that, there has been this, really, when you think of 10, when I said 12, we probably have 12 when I went there as a special speaker, so we'd have 12. And it was really a struggling, someone used the concept, I think, earlier today, a dying church. Well, things were a struggle time. And so we're so thankful for Marcelo Brondo and how the Lord prepared him to go and work with the church there and see this work go forward. They really ran out of space right away. Even though when you think of 12 people, if you triple that's like 36, and so suddenly you're all the seats are full, and so they had a whole group of children coming in that they didn't have before. So that right next to them is a place used for music lessons during the week, and so they have been able to rent that and have that for their children's work together there. And then Marcelo, he has that nice voice. Some of us have a voice that people kind of don't want to listen to, it's kind of too gruff. Marcelo, really, it's an enjoyable voice to listen to. And he has 5 hours, an hour each day of the week, Monday through Friday, that is, on the radio. And so there's 3 times on one radio station and 2 times on another radio station, and has this outreach that's there. So again, praying that there'll be more churches as there's outreach through the radio. There'll be more groups that'll be able to be reached, and this church planting will go on. And from the seminary, there'll be someone, as this work is built up in Carlos Paz, there'll be one of the students from the seminary that'll be able to take that, and Marcelo will be able to continue raising up other works. And so we have this work that is ahead there. And here is a picture of Marcelo and his wife, Nancy, and verse that he he put here, you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit and that your fruit should remain. That whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give you. And so I would just ask that you really do pray for that work there. It has been such an encouragement when we were, is this thing even going to exist? And the Lord has, in his grace, raised up Marcelo Brondo in that place. So if you do have questions, I think for time-wise, we don't have time here, but I'm more than anxious to talk with you and chat with you about Argentina and the work that is there, or any other part of Latin America. Adios sea la gloria.
What is it he's applying for? Is it
What is it?
Service church planter? Is that correct?
Uh-huh.
What's his name?
Church planter, in the sense that his work is that of seeing this church revived, and then his whole direction is to continue to see. We have about 15 other works in that general area that have been raised up, a great deal of it through the seminary, because there's groups that have been formed all around that whole area of Cordova. And so he's going to continue as this work is built up, then his desire is to see another work built up and started. So church planting is what God has given to him the experience to do. He helped plant something like about 20 years ago, the church there in Cordova with Sam Masters. And then there has been this wonderful work up in Cachi, and now he's there in Carlos Paz. And the idea for him to continue doing that kind of work as these students would fill in these different works.
Next up is the chaplain. Are we good there? Jonathan Black, is he on? Okay.
Greetings in the Lord Jesus Christ. My name is Jonathan Black. I'm a chaplain with the United States Air Force, and I wanted to introduce myself as being newly accepted into the Reformed Baptist Network as a military chaplain. I'm so pleased to be able to join with you all. I have so much in common with you. I wanted to introduce myself to you, being that I'm new, and I'm sorry I couldn't be there. There have been a number of family emergencies in my family this summer, and I'm still working through those things, which has prevented me providentially from being with you all. I wanted to just say that I was born and raised in the Washington, D.C. area in Maryland, just south of the capital, born into a Christian home, and professed Christ as my Lord and Savior when I was a child. Later on, when I was 13, I understood more clearly and in more depth the gospel and what it meant to be a sinner and what Christ accomplished. I felt conviction of my sin at that point as well. And I kind of had a renewal of my profession of faith and was thereupon baptized at Faith Baptist Church in White Plains, Maryland. And from there, went on and finished high school. I graduated from a Christian school, Southern Maryland Christian Academy. And from there, went to college. And then through my activities at the church that I went to as a young man, I sensed a call to ministry and received some confirmation of that from the church as well as from some other pastors in the area, and transferred my college credits to Washington Bible College, which now has been subsumed into Lancaster Bible College there in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. But it used to be in the Washington area as Washington Bible College. So graduated there and had a very brief pastorate, and from there I was working also, when I was graduating, I was also working for the federal government in Washington. And after that pastorate, moved to transferred to the Boston field office, where I worked there for a while. And while I was there in New England, I joined a Southern Baptist church, and the call was still on me, even though I had a good job, as the world would see it. So I decided to take a step of faith, and I enrolled at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary in Wake Forest, North Carolina, and moved there in 1995. This is a time when the Southern Baptist Convention had its 1980s and early 90s conservative resurgence, and so the seminary was solid at that time under the leadership of Paige Patterson, and I enjoyed my studies there but could not finish. So I transferred back to New England and began teaching at a classical Christian school, Aquidneck Island Christian Academy there in Newport, Rhode Island, and enjoyed life there on the island for many years, taught for 7 years there. And at the same time, I also became the pastor of Green Meadow Baptist Church as a bivocational pastor. And while there, as my faith deepened into a reformed understanding of things in Scripture, I was able to see the church move itself toward being reformed. We became Green Meadow Reformed Baptist Church. And after some years there, we combined churches with another church. New England is a difficult place to do ministry, very secular. So we combined with another church, and it's called Grace Bible Church of Cranston, Rhode Island. And Dan Crichton is the pastor there now. And so we worked together. At that time in my life, I also, though involved as an elder, kind of as associate pastor, I moved over into the hospice chaplaincy, which I did for almost 10 years, and then also into the military chaplaincy. I was in the Army National Guard for the state of Rhode Island. And so spent a number of years ministering both in the church as well as in uniform, as well as in hospice, and that was very fruitful. What I'm going to do at this point is we'll make this part A because of the size of the videos that I'm trying to send. So I'll make this part A, and I'll pick up and do a part B. So I'll be right back with you. Thanks. Okay, this is part B. Let me pick up where I left off. So while I was in New England, working at the Christian school, and then as well at the pastoring at Grace Bible Church, and in the military chaplaincy in the Rhode Island Army National Guard, I wanted to complete seminary where I had left off in North Carolina. So Southern Seminary out of Louisville, Kentucky, had an extension school in Massachusetts. So I finished my MDiv by attending the Northeastern campus there, as well as trips to Louisville in the summer, and they call them J-terms. So I was able to complete the degree. And then from there, I went on and finished up another degree, a Master of Arts in Modern European History. I love history very much, and I enjoy teaching. So that has come in use in the years since then to teach at college and American history and European history. So that's been helpful, kind of as a second skill set. And so in 2017, I wanted to try the active duty, the full-time military. So I was accepted in. And so our first assignment was at Little Rock Air Force Base, Arkansas. It was a good time of learning and getting into what it meant to be in the active duty and learning a lot of things and doing ministry of all kinds and running the chapel, Protestant chapel service, preaching and a lot of counseling and so forth. And then after almost 3 years there, I went on a remote assignment to Turkey. Due to security reasons, my families cannot accompany the service member. So I was there for 13 months, and that was a very fruitful time of preaching, a lot of counseling, some activities. Even did a 7 churches tour. We toured all churches that are mentioned in Revelation. First 3 chapters are all in Eastern Turkey. So we did a 4-day tour of those. I also did a lot of discipleship, and praise God, 3 of the young men that I was working most closely with have all since come back to the States. All are either in Bible college or seminary and pursuing ministry in the ways that God has led them. So I praise God for that fruitfulness. Saw some professions of faith and also baptized a young man while I was there. And from there, we moved on to where we're currently stationed, which is in Germany, in Wiesbaden. It's a unique position, working closely with the U.S. Army. And I've done a lot of visitation as well as counseling, and visiting the troops in our various locations scattered throughout Eastern Europe. And of course, with the Russia and Ukraine war going on, that has intensified the visits, the mission, the operations. And so that's increased more stress and anxiety on soldiers and airmen and families. And that provides me with more ministry opportunity to bring people to Christ. I do want to highlight one example recently of ministry there. Some of you are familiar with Ken Sande, who wrote the book Peacemaker, and he has a ministry called RW360, Relational Wisdom 360. And it's basically combining some of the good aspects of emotional intelligence with biblical wisdom. So it's taking the wisdom and the principles of Scripture about how people relate to one another, and how even to understand yourself, and presenting it in a Christian framework, Christian worldview, and it teaches people how to be wise in their relationships. And we took about 50 airmen and families to Bavaria, the Bavarian Alps, to a military resort, and spent a long weekend there teaching, and we received good feedback on that. And the couples want more of what they got. And so we were able to present a Christian worldview, and it was a beautiful experience. Well, at this point, I'm hoping to join live in spite of this video. I'd like to join live, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. Please keep us in prayer, myself and my wife, Ala Edie, and our 2 boys, Nathan and Ian, 13 and 10 years old each, and safety and ministry and good health. And we will look forward to meeting you all more in the future. Okay, God bless you.
Do we have him on, Derek?
There is no plan to have Jonathan live. He's in a traveling mode. We weren't sure if we could secure him, but I'll just tell you that Jonathan has been in somewhat of a family crisis season, as his brother died very unexpectedly about a month, maybe 5 weeks ago. And then when he got back to Europe, he's been stationed with some of the troops, somewhat related to issues with Ukraine. Then his mother died. So he had to come back to transition. So we don't have him for Q&A at this time. We're just considering that video as being an added introduction.
Thank you, Mark. All right, any questions about any of our missionary, Marcelo Brondo or Jonathan Black? I just want one point of clarification. I think in your, this is page 64 and 65 is where their information is located in your notebook. And 65, it says that Marcelo Brondo would be a service church planter. I don't believe that's actually a category, and we've discussed this, and it should be, he will be a service missionary, and that means that the servicing, the finances will go through RBNet for him as a missionary in that country. It'll be ongoing work. He is planting churches, but the correct category should be, I think, service missionary. Now, at this time, anybody need the ballot? We're going to do the second vote. This is for all the churches, associate members, the individuals, and for missionary chaplain. So if you need a ballot, remember 1 per church, but if you need a ballot, raise your hand. Otherwise, you can go ahead and fill that out now and pass it down to the end of the row so we can collect those. And we're going to report back, Lord willing, before dinner on the results of that. Question, Aaron.
On that ballot, you said you were going to come back with faithful and true Baptist Church for associate membership, not full membership.
Yes, I thought we did. Did we do a presentation? Yeah, the video? Yeah. Yeah, I think there was a video from Chansky. Faithful and True Baptist. Didn't we have a video for them for the associate membership? Yeah, okay. So it was there. Yeah. Well, there were a few churches along the way. You know, it's easy to get confused. What's that?
Chad, Jim would like to make a point of clarification there in Colorado.
Okay, yes, Jim.
Just to make it known, I think it's just a oversight. Coconut Creek is not the sponsoring church.
I wrote that down, actually.
Sponsoring church.
Cornerstone's the sponsoring church, and Iglesia Crecer is where he's a member.
It's actually there with Central Crecer, which is the church where San Masters is in Córdoba, Argentina.
Do you notice how Jim and I pronounce the name of the church identically?
It's the Reformed Baptist Church in Córdoba, Argentina.
Yes.
Where Sam Masters is one of the 7 elders.
Thank you, Jim.
The sponsoring church for Jonathan Black is Emmanuel Baptist Church, Coconut Creek.
And that is correct on there. It says his church membership is there. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anyone still filling that out? Okay. All right. Hopefully those are making their way in. We have almost an hour before dinner. My hope is that we can finish all the business today. So let's try to press on. Next up is the Missions Committee. They have a request and a recommendation. You can find that on page 76 in your notebook, but Matt Foreman's going to present that. We are going to hold the vote on that, and I hope that will be clear later why. The Personnel and Finance Committee has some things to present, and we're going to hold that vote and take that later just before we take a vote on the budget.
So are overwhelmed by the amount of information you've received today. And it all seems like a blur. And that's a good thing, but it highlights the ongoing need for communication. So last year, the Missions Committee met and identified a list of initiatives, priorities that we perceived for a network. And the number one desire we had, as you'll notice in the notebook, is to develop RBNet's online presence as a forum for publication, communication, and awareness of Great Commission opportunities, philosophies, and priorities. Because of the continued growth of the network, an online portal would serve our churches by providing more accessible and understandable content, overcoming information overload, connecting churches with our missionaries, and growing an awareness and interest in evangelism, missions, and church planting. Specifically, we are recommending that the network appoint a man with pastoral discernment to serve as a communications and content editor, working with the RBNet office to develop an active content web presence. This could include regular video updates on missionaries and missions opportunities, soliciting and publishing articles, and recommending resources. So in our church, at this point, RBNet has 26, 27 missionaries, workers around the world. And, your church might directly support a handful of those, and yet you get communications from them all. And we've heard from people in our church that it can just be overwhelming. Who's who, what names are which. And as we considered that need, and as the network has grown, we want to be excited about this work that God is doing around the world. We want our people to be excited about it, to be praying about it. But that highlights even more the need for communication. And what you realize then is that the work of missions also includes the work of supporting missionaries. And that's just as much a work of missions. Mark mentioned this morning, or the finance committee mentioned this morning, when something comes up where we need to get money to our workers in India and the banks there are causing trouble, we need people on the ground to figure those things out. And those are areas where we need that kind of service to be able to do this work. And so that really is missions work. And what we're perceiving in the network is we need that kind of thing. So it's a little bit more organization for our communication. And utilizing technology. And one of the things we have talked about is utilizing the website more to, on a regular basis, be putting up content that's available to our churches for your prayer meeting, that you could put up a video update from these missionaries that's regularly updated. So when you want to get those names before your people, they don't just have a name on a piece of paper, but they can see a face, they can hear a voice, they can get reports, and they begin to connect more with that work. And God uses that to encourage them, inspire them for prayer. Also said that we have certain philosophies when it comes to how we think missions should function as a group of churches. And right now there's not out there any one source online for Reformed Baptist, philosophy of ministry, missiology, theology. And so what we thought is RBNet, the website, could facilitate some of those kinds of communications. We have core values of a network that are theological center, that's built around the 1689 Confession of Faith, and yet our gracious manner of working together, and yet our earnest mission to reach with the gospel. We could be regularly putting up content online that reflects those priorities, those core values, to be promoting the vision of our network, the ethos of our network, so that as churches, like we've heard this morning, have been coming more and more to a Reformed persuasion, can get a vision for what that can look like on an associational level. Last year, we made this recommendation, and as the year's gone along, and we've looked at the finances of the network and what this would actually look like, last May and June of this last year, we voted to approve a job description and to request formally that the churches set aside $20,000 to fund this position for 2023. So this would be a part-time position, maybe an elder in a church who could be bivocational, working in the church, but also giving part-time to devote to this kind of editing, content, soliciting, creation. So you'll see the job description there at the bottom. The communications and content editor will develop and oversee RBNet's online presence as a ministry portal for communication, promoting RBNet's core values and cooperative ministry efforts, missions efforts. This will serve the churches of the network by providing more accessible and understandable content and updates on RBNet missionaries and projects, as well as growing an awareness and interest in evangelism, missions, and church planting. It will also seek to spread and promote Reformed Baptist perspectives on theological and current issues that are in line with RBNet's core values. The communications and content editor must be a man with pastoral discernment, a heart for the work of RBNet, who has some technical ability and experience in online technology and communication. He will work under the immediate oversight of the RBNet coordinator, the Personnel and Finance Committee, and the Missions Committee. Now, this will be part of the budget presentation that will be coming up shortly. If the network approves this designation of funds, then the missions committee would work with the personnel and finance committee to find the right man for this position. Any questions? Yes, Aaron.
I'm just curious what the plan might look like for finding that person. Do you have a plan? Don't know yet. Do you have somebody in mind? Probably can't say if you do.
Yeah, the thought would be that we would kind of put it out to the churches. Please give us a list of names. We've had a list of ideas in our head, but we want to hear from the churches some recommendations. And rather than having to go through like a process of approvals, I kind of think we're asking that the missions committee and the personnel finance committee, the churches would trust us to go through that process and find the right person to bring forward. Yeah, Dustin.
Does the man need to be a member of an ArmyNet church?
We haven't specified that. I think that would be the preference for sure. Andrew, over here.
When you say a portal, does that mean like we would have a login? Would that be? Let me repeat myself. I know there's people online. When you say a portal, is that like a login, username more for pastors and members of RBNet, or would that be, because I know some of our missionaries are more,
Yes.
let's say, private, but I will say our church, we've been doing missionary of the month. So each Sunday we pray for a missionary.
Mm-hmm.
And normally I will call those in RBNet and I'll say, hey, what's going on? What do you need prayer for? And then others, not in RBNet, the Jabellos and others, so it's more on the pastor. So I just personally think this is a brilliant idea.
Yeah. So because we do have some that are working in sensitive areas, sensitive countries, there would probably be a part of this website that would be private and access only, with a password. But then others could be more public. And we've thrown around, the PCA has the By Faith online magazine, they're putting out a lot of stuff, or Alliance of Confessing Evangelicals has several online ministry websites, Reformation 21, they're putting out blogs. Those have their own flavor. This would be more kind of a network driven, portal for that kind of thing, but with a missions emphasis kind of overlaid on top of it.
I will just say, whatever is online, might want to be somewhat limited to emails, phone numbers, and things like that, because I know personally, and maybe some of you also know, you get a lot of spam. I've had people from other parts of the country email me once I was ordained, and I know it's spam. I know they're trying to get money and all that. So
you need, and that's part of it, you need someone who can like devote time to developing our policies for how to do this well, how to avoid some of those kind of dangers. Maybe one more here. Any other questions? Thanks.
All right, so I hope that made it clear why we're going to put off the vote on that. We're going to have the personnel and finance committees coming up. They have two motions. We're going to vote on those two motions and then present the budget. And what will happen next is we're going to vote on the motion by the missions committee. And if that's approved, we'll move forward with the budget because the budget already includes that. All right. So, and if it doesn't, we'll have to make amendments to the budget before we can vote on the budget. So that's why we're putting that off. So next up is Personnel and Finance Committee, Tim Feathers. He has two motions to present. And when he's done, I'll come back up and we need to take a vote on those two motions. I thought I had the page number down, but if you know.
Personnel and Finance Committee members that are here, we're going to have a quick meet and greet at 10:15 on the break tomorrow to introduce new members and get us ready to start off what looks like might be another busy year. So with that said, we're on page 74 and 75. Two motions here. The first is, you may remember that last year we left, as a committee, left here with a charge with a policy amendment to deal with undesignated funds, which we did. And then under that policy, in March, we took our first action to disperse undesignated funds, which required a vote of the churches. And so we did that all electronically. When you do an electronic vote, it requires a quorum of 60% of the churches voting, and we had 52% of the churches vote. So that matter is still pending. It's now before you here. That's on page 74. And so policy 3.3.n provides that undesignated gifts shall accumulate in a designated for future use fund until the amount exceeds $5,000, at which point the Personnel and Finance Committee, in consultation with all other committees, will make a recommendation to the churches for a vote on its expenditure. As of the June financial report, we had $6,300 in that account. That was presented to the consulting committee, where all the committee chairs are present. At that time, the missions committee recommended that $2,450 go to Pastor SB in India, sponsored by Grace Bible Church San Diego. He is currently $350 a month short in his support. This will fully fund him through the end of the year. The balance of $3,850 is to go to Ben Killian in Zambia, sponsored by Bible Fellowship Church of Greentown, Pennsylvania. He is $1,500 a month short, and this will provide additional funding for at least 2 months. So that is the motion that the P&F committee brings before the churches, is asking them to approve that disbursement of funds. The second, do we vote on that first or just want to move on to the second? Go on to the second. Okay, the second is a motion to amend a policy. You can see the issue there at the top of the page on page 75 under issue. It regards FDIC insurance as limited to $250,000 per bank account. Also, the banking industry is so large that FDIC insurance will only fund a failure of the 3 largest banks in the U.S. All other accounts would be left without coverage. Ordinarily, this wouldn't be a great risk, but with the way things are going, we think it best that we maintain 2 or more bank accounts, keeping no more than $250,000 in each bank. It's just wise banking. We have the ability as a committee now to do that. What we're asking you to do is enact a policy amendment to codify that practice in the policy so future committees will be aware of it. So what we're asking is in policy 3.3.a, we're going to amend the last sentence and add another sentence, but I'll read the whole paragraph. I'm guessing nobody has it in front of them. So it reads, bank or brokerage accounts and credit cards belonging to, under the care of, or in the name of RBNet will only be opened by resolution of the RBNet Personnel and Finance Committee. All such approvals shall be minuted in the official corporate meeting records. Further, funds under the care of RBNet will only be deposited in such accounts. That's how the paragraph currently reads. We want to strike the last word accounts and specify deposited in such FDIC insured accounts, and then add this sentence. RBNet will maintain 2 or more accounts with no more than $250,000 in any one account. So it gives us the flexibility to expand those accounts to however many we would need to maintain that FDIC insurance coverage. So those are the 2 motions. Okay.
So we're going to go one at a time in terms of voting. So first is disbursement of undesignated funds. Before we take a vote on that, is there any question, debate, or amendment needed? Good. All right, can someone move to take a vote on this? All right, Stephen Graham and Jarvis seconds that. We're going to take a vote out loud. So all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes. Next is the motion to, can I say, this is a reminder that it's important that we actually participate throughout the year. We may be presenting churches. We have 13 or so that are interested that may be presented in the course of the year. Please make sure you return the vote so we can do business in the course of the year and not have to have it wait, especially you think about churches coming in or business that needs to move forward. Okay, next is the motion to amend the bank brokerage account details. Any questions, discussion, or amendment to that? Yes. Wait for your mic.
Did you take into consideration ESG scores? I'm just wondering, in the political climate in which we live, if we should try to avoid banks. That is becoming a major issue in the larger banks. And if we're putting our funds in a bank that is governed by ESG scores, then there's a good chance somewhere down the road that may impact us in a very negative way.
And I would have to turn to Pete and Stephen to answer that question because they did all the background work on banks and stuff. Right, based on my recollection of the discussions, we were looking at the three largest banks because of the way FDIC insurance works. They are the ones that will get coverage first, and they're going to basically exhaust the fund. So is that correct, Pete?
Microphone for Pete. Thanks, guys.
I don't particularly want to get into the politics of the situation, but I will say that this was a situation where we considered it necessary to consider the possibility of antagonism from some of these very large banks. And so, yes, this was directed at the question of social credit scores and other antagonistic measures that might be taken. And beyond that, I think we should limit our discussion to the fact that we're going to find the safest banking relationships that we can find, both creditworthiness and social engineering worthiness. So I hope that answers the question.
You did a good job.
Okay. Any other questions, amendments?
Just asking, is this the exact language in this motion that's going to be in the policy?
Yeah,
Is it
I mean,
because
I think I can answer that. That they have the wording down there. So as he read off the old one, you could see the changes, but that would be the new wording, correct?
it says will only be deposited in such accounts, FDI insured accounts. There's a couple of words too many, maybe?
That first accounts should have a strike through in it. That's the old language
Oh, okay.
that's being replaced by what follows.
Okay.
Good catch there. All right, now I want clarification. Maybe Steve Graham can help me, or Mark Chansky. We now have the votes back on the churches. Could I announce that, and then are they included in this, or do they have to wait to participate in the votes? Anybody know beyond me about that?
Gordon can correct me, but I would think if they've been voted in, then they can participate in these votes.
Anybody else have objection to that or know some reason why it can't? Okay, I get a thumbs up from Matt. He's kind of like the Pope here.
Pete assures me that there is precedence and we've done that in the past.
Okay, great. Wow, memory's better than mine. Yes, Kevin.
Just to clarify, each of those new churches would have one designated voting representative, is that correct?
Yes, so they still need to, at some point, let the registration know who the designated voter is once they get received. That's a good point, Kevin. Sorry about my Pope comment. We don't actually have popes here. Okay. All right, so let me announce then that every church was approved for full membership and associate membership, and was approved, as were the chaplain and the service missionary. So approval for everyone who is up this year. So and much appreciation to Don Reimer, our paper guy who handled the votes, the tallying and all that. John Sweat too. Okay. So let me be clear then, of the ones that just got voted in, if you were voted in as a full member church, your church may now place one vote. We will do this orally, so if you're sitting around someone that's more than one person in your church, sort this out quickly. Okay, so now you're included in this motion. Any other discussion, amendment, or does someone want to call for a vote? Yes, Paul Thomas calls for a vote, and I have a second from Troy Lamberth. Lamberth or Berth? Berth. Okay, so we got those two down. All right, all in favor of approval of this, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, great. Next then is Tim Feathers presenting the budget.
Okay, you'll find the proposed budget on pages 52 and 53. And if you have your book, I am going to ask you to turn there. One of the consequences of growth of the network is our budget starts to become a bit more complex. And I will tell you that this year's budget, you're going to see as I go through it, is we're taking a step of faith here to move the network ahead in the context of this growth that we're experiencing. So I'm going to try to lay out the budget impacts of this budget as best I can. So I want to focus your attention on page 53. The top half of page 53 is projected income. Okay, and it's projection, it's an estimate. Now it has some historical background to it that is pretty solid based on Pete's years of experience. And those estimates are based upon the number of churches in the network, with an estimate of adding 6 new churches a year, with a approximate dollar value that churches have historically given, and that dollar value increasing at 5% per year. So that's kind of the formula to project income through this multi-year projection. And so you can see the first column says 5/31/2022. That was the state of affairs at the end of May. The next column says January through December. It says 19, it should say 22. That's annualizing that amount, extrapolating it out to the end of the year. So that's what this year's budget would look like. And then we have the projections for 23, 24, all the way out to 2031. So that's the projections we're working with to try to calculate a budget. And so what you can see is what we are annualizing for this year is a projected total income of $141,782. Okay. So now if we go down to the let's go down to near the bottom of the page where on the left, you'll see where it says total expense. And if you look at that January to December annualized column, you'll notice total expense is projected at $120,382. That's how much we are projecting we will spend for all of our operations this year. And then the line below that shows $21,400. Okay, so that means that's how much we're projecting we will have left over after we pay all the bills this year, so to speak. And then if you go down to the bottom line of cash on hand without mission funds, okay, so this does not include what we hold in our bank accounts to service our missionaries. That money comes in from them, it goes out to them. That's just a straight in and out movement of money. This here is what comes in from income from churches, income from individuals, and is used for our operational expenses. There's a number down there that says $124,800. That's going to be that 21,000 left over plus what we've got left sitting in the bank from previous years. Do you track what those numbers represent? Because this is going to get important here in a minute. So this year, we are proposing a rather bold budget that is seeking to move ahead. And there's going to be 4 main areas that we have budget impact. One is if you look at the bookkeeper expense, you'll notice that's a new line item expense. We had well, Chris was doing most of that work and just getting buried with the volume of it. So we brought in a bookkeeper. We're now going to have a $3,500 expense through the rest of this year, $6,000 next year. So that's an increased expenditure. If you look clear down at the bottom, right above total expense, it says web hosting and development. And you'll see for 2023, that's going up to 8320. That's because we're expanding basically our web services, and this is complementary to the proposal that Matt just talked about on the web content editor. So what Matt talked about is somebody to develop content. What we're talking about is Derek Archer's services to give us the technological platform to deliver that content. Those two have to work hand in hand. And so we have a proposal from Derek for this next year on how we want to expand those web services to go along with that. The next one you see is the content editor that Matt just proposed. And we have $20,000 line item there. And the last is payroll expenses. And we have impacts in a couple of areas there. If you remember in Mark's report this morning on the coordinator's report that we were phasing in his salary. He started at 50-50, then 60-40. And this year we were supposed to go to 70-30. Okay, but Mark's employment situation has changed. He's been working full-time for us most of this year, but doing it at a 60-40 or at a 60% compensation because the 40% is not there anymore. What we are proposing in this budget is essentially this: the worker's worthy of his wage. He's working full-time for us. We need to pick up his full compensation package. So this budget includes full compensation for our coordinator at the agreed upon rates. The other thing this includes is an 8% wage increase for our employees, which right now are Mark and Chris, and that's just keeping up with the cost of living. So what you see there is, if you look at the projected annualized total expense for 2022 is $120,382. If you slide one column to the right for 2023, it's $203,076. So you see the budget impact of these proposals. Now, what we will be carrying into that is a projected income of $137,252. You'll notice then that at $203,000, that means we are $65,824 short. But we have $124,800 sitting in the bank to cover that and then some. And so if you look as we go down the line here, and if you look at that cash on hand without missions funds, by the time we get to 2025, we're projecting that to be at $8,854. And from there, it starts to go up. And that's based on those projections of income of adding 5 churches a year, those churches increasing their giving by 5% per year, and working that out. So do you understand the things that are going to really impact this budget and the anticipated revenues and costs and how we're projecting that to play out over the next couple of years? So let that sink in. Pete's got something to add, and then any questions.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I'd like to point out in these numbers that occurred to me as we were listening to all of these excited churches coming up that are considering joining. We drive the projections based upon an assumed average giving of every church that's in the network. And we've been pretty close so far. But when we start seeing the levels of excitement that I'm seeing today, we didn't include the possibilities of these 13 churches that are thinking about coming in next year.
Yeah.
And so the way I would frame this is that this is a very pessimistic look at what's coming down the road. And I want to also emphasize the fact that all of the churches that have been in here since the beginning need to catch that enthusiasm and increase their giving to the network. And we won't even be thinking about this in 2 years.
Be joyfully reformed, brothers.
Okay, question, Troy?
It's a blessing to see this, especially with, for the coordinator and some other roles developing. But looking at almost a decade of projections there, just a concern or a thought for Mark particularly, there's no cost of adjustment for living. As we know, inflation is going up and so forth. Is that something that would just come as needed, or will we put something in place since we will now have a full-time employee? A lot of places will have a 4 or 5% already built in to kind of move along. Anyways, just thought I'd ask.
Good. Yeah, no, that's a good question. What we've been doing is we take that case by case. Like, for instance, this year at 8%, that's generally more than what you might see, but we had inflation was really up there this year. So that was based on what the actual need was. So that would be something we'd be plugging in every year. Yeah. And right here.
Yep, Park Ashley, Dayton, Ohio. You had a big jump in the GA expenses. What was driving that?
Okay, GA expenses. That is a good question. We have projected 2023, $12,000. What was that, Pete?
We've assumed every year since we started that we would have $12,000 in GA expenses. What we're not including in there is that the GA expenses are covered by the registration fees, and we have not included the registration fees in these projections. And what I want to make a comment on that last question that was raised. We try to hold constant as many things as we can because we're trying to focus on the effect of one particular set of situations. We're trying to examine here, can we afford the increase that we're proposing in the budget, not considering all the ways that we might need to spend the funds. We show that we've accumulated almost $500,000 over this period of time. So if we need to increase expenses, we'll use up that $500,000 that we're building up. But if we start trying to modify everything in the projections, we're not going to be able to understand what we're projecting. Yeah. So that's why we do it that way.
If I could just follow up with Park's question. I don't understand either. It's GA expenses, 12,000 for 2023, but then 2,500 for every year after that moving forward. Just help us understand. I don't understand that.
That's kind of a recognition that we basically don't spend the money out of the budget on the GA in the first place. And so we're just bringing that down, saying we're going to put a little bit in there in case we need to fund a particular thing that we want to do in the future at a GA that's not covered by the GA committee proposals.
Okay. Yeah, essentially GA expenses are covered by registration, but if for some reason registration wouldn't cover it, it's got to come out of the budget. So.
Yeah, I just had two things. One is I'd like I'm Mark Fromoldi from New York, Tennessee. One is I'd like to propose that Pete live for at least another 75 to 100 years because of the value that he's always had with these kinds of business meetings. The other thing I was going to ask you, it said that Brother Mark Chansky has sometime earlier this year or for this whole year has worked 100% at some point. Should we not retro something more to him to account for that if he's done that work? Should we not give him something additional if he's done that this year? Why are we not going to?
Yeah, specifically at his request. When he found himself in that position, we considered bringing it to the church's mid-year for a vote at that time. He very strongly and convincingly requested that we not do that. So
you could always give the money to some other brothers here, brother, if you don't want. What are you doing for dinner this evening?
So we essentially honored his wishes on that. I mean, we see the Apostle Paul refusing support at times where he thought it may be detrimental to the advancement of the kingdom. And Mark was just trusting the Lord to provide for him and said he was ready to get after it full time, and off we went. Okay, other questions?
In years past, we've been given an estimate per church giving. We're talking in general numbers. We did that last year and we did it again this year. No specific amount, but obviously there is some amount that you guys have in mind that each church gives, so could we get that number? It would be helpful to have a solid number of what you would hope that each church gives.
I believe that number is between $2,000 and $2,500 per church. Is that right, Pete?
Well, I thought we raised it to $50,000 a month per church.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it is in that range. And again, just some things to keep in mind as you set your budgets every year. If your practice is it's the same dollar amount every year, as the cost of living goes up, the value of that goes down. So as as you're considering that amount, not only consider, obviously always in the context of what your church is able to give, that's a given, but consider that as cost of living goes up, that $2,000 you gave last year now might only be worth $1,700 because of the cost of living and as far as buying power goes and the support it will provide. So, the biblical principle of giving is voluntarily, freely, without compulsion. And so that's the standard we hold before the churches and ask them to consider that and consider the needs of our operational needs as part of that context.
But Tim, keep in mind, there is no compulsory minimum that a church must give. We realize there'll be years of fatness and give abundantly, but there may be in your church years of budget leanness. So give as you're able.
Yep. Anything else? Okay, Baruch.
You spoke about the possibility of having to go outside of churches to what would be a more expensive venue. If registration expenses are going to have to cover all that, it might become cost prohibitive to some. Have you taken that into account?
What's that?
Well, I'm not on the GA planning committee anymore as of a few hours ago, but we have discussed that extensively. We're looking into possibilities and seeing what the cost would be. But right now we're paying for a hotel separate from registration. If we're looking at a conference center, that would be included with that. And so we're hoping it may be more, but it may not be much more. But still, most of that cost is going to go to the individual. It may be cost prohibitive. We've had the fund all along, and part of the $12,000 could be used to help people. But we've had a fund where we've helped pastors in smaller churches that they need help making it to the GA.
Just to add to that, I've planned conferences before, and if you have enough people register, they often give you the meeting rooms for free. So it actually could reduce, you can find that there are ways that you can do that quite cost effectively.
And as far as budget projection goes, Baruch, no, we have not gotten to that point yet. We just started to entertain those possibilities, and it really hasn't progressed to even any kind of an in-depth discussion yet.
I understand the increase of salary for the coordinator. I'm just wondering, for Chris, she seems to do an awful lot of work. Is that included in the payroll expenses other? Is that her salary, or has she?
Yeah, is she under the other line item, Stephen? Okay. Yeah, payroll expenses other, that's Chris. Let me see that. Total, yes, that would be about right. Yeah, so that's payroll expenses other would be her.
I'm just thinking that should be more, but maybe I haven't been in those discussions, obviously. But.
Okay, Chris is not a full-time employee.
Okay.
So she's it's half-time, isn't it, Chris? Yeah, it's half-time. In fact, that's why we ended up contracting with a bookkeeper, because with the bookkeeping, it was starting to go way above half-time. And so with that move, we pulled it back down into what essentially our agreement was with her. And so, yes, that would be her salary. Hers was subject to an 8% increase as well as the coordinators.
Okay, now just to remind you of the flow of things, what I'd like for us to do at this point is for someone to move for us to vote on Matt Foreman, the motion he brought from the missions committee, their requests and recommendations of a communications and content editor. We need to settle that first before we vote on the budget, since the budget's already shown, Lord willing, that we can afford that. But we want to make sure we're going to do that first. And if we decide against it, then we'll need to amend the budget, and that would lead more discussion for Tim before we can vote on the budget. So first thing first, can I get a movement for us to vote on that? And yes, Sam Barber and Chris Powell seconds. All in favor of, again, this is the mission committee motion to add a communications and content editor. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, so we're good moving forward with that. Is there any more discussion about the budget before someone calls for a vote on it? Last chance to discuss that. All right, would someone like to move to vote on the budget? Jamie Howell and Matt Foreman seconds. All in favor of approving the budget as it stands, say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, so that passes. And you're good. Thank you, Tim, and for the Personnel and Finance Committee. All right, next up is the date for the 2023 RBNet General Assembly, and the location is Grace Baptist Church of Taylor, South Carolina. They're going to host September 18th through 21st of 2023. Again, that's Monday night through Thursday noon, the way we've done previously. Yes, okay. Grace Baptist Church of Taylor, South Carolina, September 18th through 21st, 2023. So that's almost identical dates, same time of year. We're going back to Taylor's. We haven't been there in a while. And they've made some renovations to the building and they've welcomed us there. Yes. Okay. So again, this is something that we vote to receive from the GE Planning Committee. Any discussion on this, or I don't think there'd be a room for amendment on this, but.
One detail, Chaplain, is that Paul Washer has expressed the willingness to come next year in Taylor's if Providence opens the door.
Okay. All right. So can I have someone move to approve this? All right. Jarvis Singleton. And someone second. I see Doug Van Dorn in the back. All right. All in favor of approval, say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right.
Chad,
Yes, Aaron.
say something about that real quick.
Absolutely. The microphone's coming your way.
For you folks on the West Coast, thank you for making the trek out here. We really tried to get a West Coast location for next year, or an out West location, and it just did not come together.
Yeah.
We're starting to get limited on the number of churches that are large enough to be able to host. So our apologies. We know that it's a sacrifice to cross the time zones, and we'll see what we do in the future. Conference Center may be part of that answer, but just wanted you to know that we're not just trying to have a East Coast, Midwest bias.
And I know it may be a little further to travel and they kicked me off the GA Planning Committee, but I ran out of my time. But Salvador Gomez, I mean, we really need to be considerate of him down in the Dominican Republic. Just saying. He has a large church. I think they could host it. So you guys can talk to Salvador about that and see if we can pull that off. That would be a little further to travel for the West Coast people, but we might be able to manage that. Okay, now, seriously again. Okay. Last thing, I believe, is Derek Archer's presentation by Mark Chansky. You're supposed to introduce him. Mike's not on. It's not working.
Derek Archer has been our cyberspace income. We brought him on board early this year, and the Lord has used him for great good. And I've mentioned him already. And now the official introduction of Derek Archer. He's a member of the church at Rincon, Georgia, recommended by Nick Kennicott and Sam Barber. So here he is on stage now.
All right, don't ask me to preach, but if you want me to help with your website or any other digital piece for your church, I'd be happy to do that. As I heard some member churches say even today, how do people find out about you? Often it starts with a Google search, right? A Reformed Baptist church near me, or Christ-centered church near me, or evangelical church near me. So I believe Paul would be very proud of the internet. A chance to be able, with a few clicks of a button, share the gospel with the entire world. And the reality is we are blessed with this technology to leverage it for the gospel, but it can feel a bit intimidating. So I've been blessed to be able to work with my church, Redeemer Baptist in Rincon, and now with RBNet to help with the website and with the GA conferencing, the registration process there. If you had problems with that process, that's my fault. You can blame me. It's okay. If it went very smoothly, you can thank Chris Bice. So the couple things here that I would like to present to you, we've got a booth in the back. If you're here and you want a video for yourself or your church, that's free, okay? That's complimentary. Come back there. Kendra's back there in the back. She's got a video camera. I'm back there. Just introduce yourself on camera. Introduce your church. We'd love to give that to you as a gift. Take that back. Put that on your social media. Put that on your website. No cost to you, okay? In addition to that, I'd love to have a conversation with you about several different things that we can help your church qualify for, including a $10,000 a month Google AdWords grant. That's something that opened up after COVID. It used to not be available to churches to be able to qualify for that, but that's something during COVID that they did extend to churches. So basically, that's a grant from Google that allows you to compete for those terms on Google for free. Things like Reformed Baptist Church near me, or Evangelical Church in my city or in this area. So those are a few additional resources we'd love to make available to RBNet churches. Once again, I'm in the back. There's a booth back there. We'd love to catch you on camera.
Thank you, Derek. It's a blessing to have you here. I know there's still that tendency in many Reformed Baptists to brag about not being cool. We joked about that earlier, but really, the internet, I mean, people who are coming to our churches are finding us there, and it's okay to be a cool Reformed Baptist. Just my tidbit. All right, maybe I'm speaking as a younger generation, but let me ask, is there any other business that needs to be covered during our business meeting? And the answer is no. No, any other? Wonderful. Can I have someone move to adjourn our business meeting? Dustin Battles, seconded by Chris Powell. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed to this? I didn't think so. Okay, so we finished that up, and let me have, how about, can I have a volunteer, someone who can pray for our food, and we'll dismiss? Oh, okay, announcement from GFC.
Okay, a couple of housekeeping issues, items for dinner. Tonight, for the evening service, it's going to be very, very crowded. Everybody who planned on being here is here with the exception of 9 people, I think. So this auditorium is going to be packed. Most of us are Americans. We like that space. Tonight, I ask you to please be respectful of the ushers as they ask you to scoot together. We need everybody who's a badge holder to come in, sit here in the front rows. We're reserving, you've got reserved seats. Please do not sit in the last 2 rows. We're saving those for unregistered guests, people walking off the street. So please just be respectful, move forward, scoot to the center, and leave places for your cohorts to sit on the outside. Secondly, Brandon Willard, are you here? Okay, Brandon Willard's badge is, has anybody seen Brandon? His badge is missing and he's not checked in. It's a housekeeping thing. Also, Paula Brett, your Bible's in the back. Okay, that's all I've got for that. Directions. So far, we've had 2 meals and we've laid them out differently. You guys mastered them wonderfully. Kudos to you. Tonight, we're trying for method number 3. So we're putting you to the test, but that's okay. Nobody's going to starve. It was a late lunch. It's not a real late dinner, so nobody should be starving. So we got time to work this out. As you go down the hallway, there is 1 table lined up right in the middle of that big space down there. Go down the hall and start at the head of the table. There's a big bowl of chips. It's Taco Tuesday. There's a big bowl of chips with a pile of plates there. Grab a plate. If you want chips, grab chips. Tortillas, rice, beans, meat, etc. So you'll work your way to the east. And then as you finish at the end, everybody turns left and then goes into the fellowship hall. Or if you're going to eat outside, it's a lovely evening, eat outside. Remind anybody who's in line, stay to the wall. Folks with full plates of tacos can make it past you. That's all I've got.
All right, thank you. So last 2 rows tonight need to come forward. That's right where Chris Powell is, if you want to note those last 2 rows. Okay, just wanted to point that out, Chris. Thank you. We got a volunteer in DM who's going to pray for our food tonight. I just volunteered you if you'll pray for our food. Thank you. Mike.
Our Father, we do thank you and bless you for your help and your presence and the many encouragements you've been giving us in our business meeting today. We thank you we were able to complete it in a timely way. We thank you for the food we're about ready to partake of and for the fellowship we are enjoying. We pray that we'd continue to know your presence and your help and your blessing in the rest of our time together. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. You're dismissed.